All right, let's talk about something huge in music education. We're going to get into how we can transform the way students learn, shifting them from painstakingly spelling out notes, one by one, to actually fluently reading music by recognizing patterns. Let's get right into it.
So here's a question that pretty much every music teacher and student has asked at some point. You put a new piece of music in front of them, and that look of excitement just vanishes. Suddenly it feels less like music and more like this impossible code they have to crack. So why is that? It almost always comes down to how they were taught to read in the first place.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem. On one side, you've got what we can call musical spelling. That's the slow, painful process of identifying every single note. It's exhausting. And on the other side, where we want to be, is musical reading, seeing and playing whole phrases at a time. That gap between the two, well, it can feel like a canyon.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with that sight reading struggle, then introduce this new way of thinking about reading music like words. After that, we'll get practical and show you how to put these patterns into practice, cover some really clever coaching tricks for the common roadblocks, and finally, talk about the big prize, unlocking true musical fluency.
Okay, so how do we actually build a bridge across that canyon? It all starts with our first big idea. And honestly, it's a total paradigm shift. We have to start teaching students to read music the same way we all learn to read words. This changes everything. I mean, just think about how you're reading right now. You're not sitting there sounding out House. Nope. Your brain just sees the shape of the word house and you instantly know what it is. You're reading, you're not spelling. That little cognitive jump is exactly what we're shooting for in music. So let's apply that exact same idea to a piece of music. Instead of seeing three totally separate notes, a C, a D, and an E, the student learns to see them as a single chunk, a single unit. It's a step-step pattern. And that pattern becomes like a musical word that they can recognize and play instantly. Okay, that's the theory, and it sounds great, right? But how do we actually get this into the lesson room? Let's dig into a really practical, hands-on method called the pattern challenge. The structure here is just brilliantly simple, and it's totally repeatable. The student plays a short musical pattern for 3 bars in a row, and then, boom, in the 4th bar they resolve it by playing the tonic, or what you might call the home note. This repetition isn't about mindless muscle memory. It's about building deep recognition. And what's so great about this is how flexible it is. For a piano student, it might be C step-step, D step-step, E step-step, and then land on C. But for a flute player, you could base it all around G. It even works for singers using solfege, like do step-step. You can adapt it to pretty much any instrument you can think of. Of course, let's be real, no teaching method is a magic bullet. Things are going to come up, so let's look at a few really clever coaching techniques to get over some of the most common hurdles students run into. The first big one is that the student's brain, well, it loves to take shortcuts. Instead of actually recognizing the pattern, they just end up memorizing the sequence of notes they have to play. And that totally defeats the whole point of the exercise. So, how do we fix this? We turn it into a game. This is the dice game solution. It's super simple. You just assign numbers from a die to each of the 3 pattern bars. The student rolls the die, and that tells them which bar to play. All of a sudden, they can't just rely on muscle memory. They have to look and recognize the pattern. And this is the secret sauce for why it's so effective. This isn't just about making it fun. The source material actually calls this a cognitive disruptor, which is a fancy way of saying it completely messes with the brain's attempt to just memorize. It forces the student to stop and actively engage with the pattern itself. That's where the real learning kicks in. Okay, another hurdle, and we've all seen this one, especially with our younger students, is just plain old nervousness. That fear of messing up can be totally paralyzing. The answer here is to make it a team sport. It's all about collaboration to lower the stakes. You can try playing one note and have your student play the next, or have them play 1 bar and then sing the next. You could even get a parent involved where you each play 1 note of the pattern. It instantly turns a high-pressure test into a fun, supportive activity. But what about the other end of the spectrum? You've got an older, maybe more advanced student who looks at a simple 3-note pattern and just thinks, this is way too easy. How do we keep them from getting bored? Easy. We turn it into a quest. The challenge is no longer about just playing the pattern. It's about finding the pattern out in the wild.
And we call this the scavenger hunt. You challenge the student to become a detective, tell them to go through the pieces they're already working on, or even famous works, and find where this simple, fundamental pattern is hiding. It's an amazing way to connect this basic exercise to the complex, beautiful music they already love. It proves just how relevant it is. So, you see, all of these things, the pattern challenges, the dice games, the scavenger hunts, they're all building blocks, and they are all leading toward one single thing: unlocking real, honest-to-goodness musical fluency. You might have noticed that we always repeat the pattern 3 times. That's not random. There's a really deep, almost ancient musical reason for it. Repeating something 3 times creates this feeling of establishment. And then that fourth bar gives you this incredibly satisfying resolution. Historically, in medieval times, a measure of 3 was even called perfect time because it represented the Holy Trinity. It's a structure our brains just recognize as complete, which helps make the pattern stick.
And really, that brings us right back to where we started. The ultimate goal of this entire approach is to fundamentally change how a student sees the written page. It's about getting them past the clunky mechanics of individual notes so they can become fluent musical readers, empowered to play with true understanding. When we teach music as a language of patterns, as a collection of words and phrases, we're giving our students the tools to not just play the notes, but to understand the conversation happening within the music. And that leaves us with a really exciting final thought. Once they've mastered this first musical word, what amazing words will your students learn to read next?